All right, so we're here. It's arena time. We're here with the one and only. Oh, that's the wrong direction. You can't see me, but here I'm pointing at you. Oh, hold on. No, this is terrible. Uh, the one and only. This is so bad. One and only Riot Roguefool, Arena's lead designer. We're going to be talking about Arena today. We've got a big bunch of changes with Arena on the PBE right now. Did you want to introduce yourself and then kind of run through your changes?
Yeah, so I'm sure I'm gonna miss some of the changes as we go through. It's been a lot, but yeah, like Edstep said here, I'm Rogue Fool, lead designer on arena release. Basically, I've been working on Arena since it first came out, and now working on to leading on the set here, or on this release, not the set. I'm thinking I'm thinking VFT stuff.
TFT terms.
Yeah. Basically, uh, big things that we've got coming with this release. If you haven't already seen it on the PBE, the ability to level your augments. So there's going to be more augment rounds coming up more frequently, basically every other round. Once you've taken a couple of augments, you get the ability to level them up, more powerful effects. A lot of them have this capstone thing. When they get to their max level, they unlock some additional bonus. Some of the ones that I really like is quantum computing. When it gets max level, it lets your autocast have a chance to multicast. Mirror image, all of your clones, not just the clones from mirror image, but clones in general, now get copies of your augments. Those are probably two of my favorites there, but we've got them kind of scattered throughout for all different sorts of people to enjoy. Earthwake and Spellwake do double waves, etc. We've got new guests of honor. There's about 20 new ones that we've put in. We're cycling out the old batch for now and bringing in these total new ones. They play in a lot of the new spaces. We found what kind of works with the old ones that we liked and are playing, building up from there. We've got a new map, the Petrosite Grove. It's got bombs that you can hit. They roll into other things. Ancestral Woods rework. Instead of just having one power flower in the center, it's got two of them spread throughout and then a Bulwark Blossom in the center. Last hitting that gives you a shield, healing, and some adaptive force. That bonus is doubled if you're outnumbered. So if you're like in a 1v2 scenario, or in our new events thing, if you're in a 1v3 scenario. Speaking of events, every couple patches, we're going to be cycling what arena means. So we're starting with two by eight, 8 teams, 2 people on each team, moving into threes for 3 patches. This is 6 teams, 3 people on each team, then going into bravery and crowd favorite only, and then a little bit more classic of just down to 4 teams that we're going to be looking to try out over this release. Some new augments, some coming from Mayhem. I'm sure I'm missing some details. It has been a lot going into this release, and I think the team's quite excited about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a lot of stuff. I mean, I'm not that involved. I'm sure I'm super unaware of a lot of the stuff that's going in here. The stuff you're covering is like a lot of that I didn't even know. So yeah, it's cool to hear for sure. Even for me as someone maybe a little closer than most of the viewers. Yeah, let's start talking about some of the questions we got here. I think.
Yeah.
Impact of prismatic items, magnitude of impact. What's the right place for them?
So prismatic items have been a tricky space. We don't want you to be able to get them too reliably and get the same thing every time. They're supposed to be exciting. You get Pyromancer's Cloak, for example. It enables or amplifies this idea of burn builds. So we do want you to be able to high roll different styles. And then we have some safer bets, the old mythics. I know NSEP's talked quite a bit about those in the past that we've got throughout it. So we do want you to be able to have the crazy high rolls. If they don't work for you, though, you can sell it, get regular items, try for other prismatics. We've got Orn as a guest of honor who allows you to purchase directly which prismatic item you want, or Poppy gives you an extra one to try to get some more reliability there. But it's a difficult line to walk because sometimes you're going to feel like you just didn't get a good option for you. Luckily, Arena's round structure and health means that if you're really just low rolling, you can get out and go on to the next game. And for those that get their sweet high roll, god roll situations, they can actually kind of they'll be fighting in the finals there, or so that's kind of where we've seen the power level on them. One interesting thing on it is this idea of like when should you get the prismatic item. If it's too early, it turns into this build defining thing, and that's what we've wanted. But if it's too late, it's you can't really build around it. So there's tends to be some amount of like where's the right spot for it, and that's why we've got them on round 2 now, so that you can get it early enough to start building around.
Do you have any particular thoughts around like are there specific prismatics that you think do a really good job of like communicating to players the right amount of impact they're supposed to have, or like the right amount of sort of build support that they're supposed to have? Or alternatively, are there items that other prismatics that you look at and say like these actually don't do a good job of telling the story? Like are there specific ones that you would think about in that space?
Yeah, yeah. I think pyromancers, and now I'm biased here. This is one that I had made, but I think this does a really good job of like telling the story. It starts out very weak, small fire pools throughout, but if you build a bunch of burns, they get massive. It's all over the place, kind of gives that the world's on fire vibe, and it tells you like go build burn. And this is a thing that like traditional Summoner's Rift, or now with Mayhem, it's a little bit different, but like the idea of building a bunch of burn isn't necessarily recognized by the game normally. I think the original Hexbolt Companion was one that really fell below the bar. For those unfamiliar, this was an item that said every other attack I do fires a missile from my ally. It applies there on hit effects. And it was just really hard to understand what you're supposed to be doing. Am I supposed to be tanky to survive and get a bunch of hits? Am I supposed to build a bunch of attack speed? Now my partner has to build those. What's the right scenario with that? So this is one that we've actually reworked with this release. And we're interested to see how it works out. To be now, it is your energized attacks trigger your auto casts.
Hmm.
So it still applies on hit effects. It's an autocast, fires on its own, but it helps signal, hey, you should be trying to build a bunch of autocast things, and then uh, builds in and amplifies that. Especially if you can get lucky with like lightning rod and this, or in quantum computing, that's just an insane combo that you can put together. Um, I think those are probably the two best examples that come to mind. We've reworked a few of them to try to better build into this. Uh, I don't know what I've you and I have talked a fair bit about prismatics in the past. Is there anything that comes to mind that I might be missing?
No, I mean my thought on the system as a whole, I think as it exists right now is you like from my perspective at least, I think for the goals of the system, you want a mix of yeah, this has some good stats and it like binds to your kit in some way that's exciting for you, right? I don't know what the current versions of this, but like some of your previous versions of um like not sorry, what is this? Sword of the Divine, where this it's like, oh, I'm a crit champion. Of course, I want Sword of the Divine. That like, there's nothing special about Sword of the Divine except yeah, you probably want to build crit, right? And there's
Mhm.
nothing like exceptional happening there. It's sort of in line with your normal builds. But then you have stuff like Pyromancer's Cloak, of course, which tells you to do something different, right? There are some champions where you would buy a lot of burn items, but there are also a lot of champions where well, maybe Blackfire Torch isn't really the best item for you. Normally, it's a little bit worse than others, but you would switch to BFT because you have Pyromancers. And I think you want, a spread of items sort of in both of those camps and even between them. And like I said, I'm not super familiar with the changes that you have in the current one, so I can't like speak to these exist in this spread. But in the previous versions of Arena, which I've played a lot, I actually felt pretty good about that spread where most champions, most games you would get offered something that would support your champion from a stats perspective, but you would also often be offered something that would sort of open you up to a different build or at least a slightly different build, like sort of different path. And of course, with augments, that sort of multiplies on top of that, which then can get you even into more crazy stuff, right? But we don't need to get into all of that since this is more focused on prismatic items, I think. But yeah,
Yeah, I
uh,
think
good.
some of them, like you said, Sword of the Divine is supposed to be this like, hey, you're a crit champion. This is your dream amplifying item. Some of them do push you into other things. I think the stat binding's definitely been the trickier side of like, hey, Sword of the Divine amplifies your crit, and I'm a mage. I can't normally crit. Why am I offered this? And then I get Jewel's Gauntlet, and then it's this actual like amazing high roll. This is why a lot of them have adaptive force,
Yeah.
but even then, it's definitely not perfect because of just champions want different stats. Um, I tend to see the prismatic items kind of in a similar role to the like relics in Slay the Spire, where not all of them are going to be perfect for you, but you don't tend to hate having any of them. And in our case, you can sell it and get something else. But that's kind of the this position that I see them in.
Yeah,
It's definitely not perfect though.
yeah, I think that makes sense. I think it's interesting that, um, to me, one of the things that I liked about the prismatic system is that you'd often be excited about something. I will say selling them is definitely a sad experience. You know, in my like
For sure.
in my time playing Arena, when I play, when I played Arena, like, wow, I actually didn't get anything that I want, and I have to sell it. I feel bad about that. Which, it's this system for sure is not perfect, right? I mean, no system is, but that's definitely one where it's like I recognize that this is a legal, path available to me, but I'm not going to be thrilled about it.
For sure. For sure.
All right, I think that's good for this question. Let's cut this one and move on. Build defining items like Blossoming Dawn, and can there be more of these?
So the answer is kinda, and which I know is not the best, most satisfying answer. I think Sword of Blossoming Dawn is probably a like gold standard for these kind of effects. It helps amplify and open up these like Paladin builds and other stuff around that people are really excited about. I know you've looked at Sword of Blossoming Dawn as well, so it's got a lot of potential. If we find the right things, then I think it's really good for us to have. The tricky thing is we don't want to overload the item system. There's a lot of items that we've brought over from the rest of League of Legends into Arena to allow all these things to be possible. But with item anvils, the more items we add, the less reliable that is. And there's boundaries there that we want to pay attention to, as well as just what people are familiar with. Sword of Blossoming Dawn's gotten enough attention, but we have things like Anathema's Chains that most people just don't even know exists because it's not a standard League of Legends item at this point. And so we don't want to have too many in that case. Uh, so I think if we have the right idea, then we can build them. But they're typically there to support particular augment and fantasies that come from that. Rite of Ruin's another one of like shielding yourself or shielding your allies more that I think really helps out there.
This is a sort of weird, oddball, maybe slight tangent, but maybe it's fun to talk about it. The idea that just occurred to me. Have you ever thought about having an anvil section for just like weirdo items that just don't apply to like most situations? Like, hey, here is your, instead of fighter anvil, this is just like bizarro anvil, and you get weird, bizarre items like sort of blossoming dawn.
I've thought about an anvil that gives you any item that
Okay.
we could put in. Not I haven't gone to the like specific bizarre section one. That could be interesting to try out. I think most people probably avoid that, and it turns into like if you my issue with the any item is kind of the like this is really good for Jax. The anvil probably has to be like much cheaper than typical ones because it
Sure.
allows anything, but Jax can get he can use functionally any item to an extent. And yeah, I mean, it's not going to be perfect, but like he's the
Sure,
example I'm
sure,
using
yeah.
here. Yeah, and then and so trying to get that line, I think would be interesting. I'm not sure what we really get out of it, other than, hey, you want to check out Bizarro items? Uh, here's the sampling we've chosen for you this game. And I do think prismatic items do this pretty well as well. Like they're a good place for us to put these bizarro ideas and put them right in front of you and then say build something out of this.
Okay. Sounds good. All right, let's cut this one and move on to the next. Paladin archetype, turning sustain and direct combat power. Was it intentional or an accident? Could this work in SR? And it didn't specify this in the question in Discord, but I was kind of assuming this was talking about stuff like Circle of Death and other similar augments that kind of allow you to turn your healing and or shielding into raw damage. Since that's sort of what it seemed like it was getting at. You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So probably the two that most come to mind for me is some like there's this idea of like Paladin Urgot and Paladin Mordekaiser that we've seen a lot of people build, and I absolutely really love this. To the sort of Blossoming Dawn thing from before, that's one that kind of enables this aspect to it's not quite Paladin, but this like marksman healing up your ally and protecting them so that we actually really like. Having these off builds is really cool. One of the things that we do with Arena is we tend to have a much more open idea of buffing ratios, alt AP ratios and the like, to help allow allow for these other builds or other play styles. So it's kind of an accident, kind of intentional. I don't know if we said like this is going to work for Mordekaiser so much as like this is just a really cool idea. People are going to figure something out with it, and if not, then maybe it shouldn't be there. Is typically how we do a lot of those as we're like playtesting internally in this inside and everything. So some of them intentional. We've done a fair bit of work to try to support these because we do think it's really cool to have this alt style. As for Summoner's Rift, that's more a you question than me of like how to support these.
Yeah, actually, something that's interesting. I'm interested to know if you actually know this because I know this used to be true. I don't know if it's still true. It used to be the case that part of what made the heal and shield power so good on Mordekaiser was that heal and shield power would affect the shield, and then when you consumed it to heal yourself, heal and shield power would affect it again. So you would essentially get the value of heal and shield power twice when you converted through from shield to heal. I don't know if that's still true. Do you know if that's ever been changed?
I would assume it still works. I don't see why we would have changed that. And basically, if that changed on Mordekaiser the champion, then that would be affecting here. But as far as I know, that's still there.
Okay, so part of the reason why I was asking is like it's talking about like whether it is intended or not, right? When Endless Pillows made Mordekaiser, I'm sure he was not considering heal and shield power on the W, like the fact that it was being calculated like essentially twice into the end effect, which allows you to sort of double dip on the value, and that was never a problem, right? For SR, right? It was something that was kind of like a weird quirk or curiosity of the champion, but it is something where oh, it turns out this is sustainable, right? And I think back to the very first version of Arena where there was just the wildly overpowered enchanter starting item. And it was like, oh, actually, like, if you have a heal or shield on your kit that is powerful, this item is probably your best starting item because it was just so insanely tuned. Because the perspective at the time was like, oh, enchanters are so weak, they need something really strong. And then it turned out the best user of the super juiced heal and shield power item was not enchanters, it was like Mordekaiser and Nunu, right? Which was wild. Anyway, we don't need to get into the whole history thing, but that's just like one of the things that makes me think of. Anyway, as for whether it could work in SR, I think there's definitely something cool there. I will say one of the reasons why this stuff doesn't manifest is that SR has a lot, like, asks a lot more of your kit, right? You have to lane, you have to farm, you have to be able to skirmish, you have to be able to play a 5v5, right? Arena asks you to 2v2 and in the future 3v3, and that's a much more limited scope of things that you're being asked to do. So enhancing really narrow parts of a champion kit, it's a lot easier for that to be functional in Arena than it is in SR because there's a lot of things in Arena that kind of break down when you start looking at 5v5s. This is one of the problems we've come into when we like in the past have tested some of like the Arena items or even Arena augments that we've tried versions of in SR is oh, this is pretty cool in like the bot lane 2v2 or like in skirmishes or whatever. And then when you get to a 5v5, it stops making sense. It's either like too good and hard to tune or doesn't work at all. The Paladin stuff, I suspect if we really put a lot of effort into it, I think we could probably find a way to make it work. But I suspect it probably comes with, like, it would probably need kit adjustments to some of these champions, right? Where ultimately, in the current version, with Mordekaiser spamming his W, it's like, okay, so how does that champion clear a wave exactly? Like how does that champion get to the point where he has the items that he needs in order for that build to function? Because that build like needs multiple items and augments to be good in most games, and it's kind of like, okay, so where are you getting that gold if your Q does no damage and you can't farm very easily? Is there like how would we enable that? It's there's like a few steps missing. It's not just oh if Circle of Death existed, this would suddenly be a viable build. It's like oh actually you have to get the steps that are missing in how do you get to the point where that build works, and then you also have to ask the question after you get to your 2 or 3 items when it's functional or whatever, is that build functional in a 5v5? Maybe the answer is yes, maybe the answer is no, but that's kind of how I look at it is it's not a no, right? I think that especially if we built a champion from the ground up to do this, which I think we should, right? Like this is something August talks about a lot. If you ever listen to August, he always talks about wanting a paladin. I think that's very fair. We don't have a traditional paladin in the game. We have some things that are like sort of close. We've got Tarek, we got Leona, we've sort of got Kale, I guess. We like sort of have Garen or like sort of like a little bit towards that. But I do think a traditional paladin that's designed to do this kind of thing would be awesome. So I like, but in terms of the could we do it with the current tools? I think we're a few steps away, and I'm not sure exactly how we'd solve all of those different steps.
Yeah, and I think SR in particular, like, um, is that the fantasy of the character? Whereas like Mordekaiser, you don't think of him as paladin or supporting his allies aspect. Arena is intentionally much more loose and allowing people to do these and put these creative builds that come together. That I think we wouldn't want that to be Mordekaiser's main thing in either mode, to be clear.
Yeah,
but
I think
but
that's fair.
yeah.
Yeah, as well. It's something I actually don't think about that much because when we do alt builds in SR, most of the time we're like, all right, we're going to enhance this specific part of the kit, and we're not adding a new output to that thing, and so it's already we're enhancing something they already do, and in most cases that kind of has to be on fantasy because it's one of the things that they're already doing. Whereas you're totally right in this case, we're kind of adding a new output to these champion kits, right? Like the Nunus and the the Mordekaisers and the Urgots. And it's like, oh, this is an entirely new output that they didn't have before, which can be pretty off fantasy, and we wouldn't want that to be their main thing. You're 100% right about that. All right, let's move on to the next question. Trundle encounter. What was the purpose? This was originally getting at like, hey, this can be pretty frustrating that you can't buy the items that you want, you can't get the synergies that you want. Like, what was the original sort of goal for the Trundle encounter itself, where you have to buy the anvils instead of get your actual items?
Yeah, yeah. So this is a spicy one. Yeah, I think Trundle is probably one of the more experimental and guests that we tried, and definitely the most contentious that we had internally. I think the big difference, or what we were aiming for here, is this idea of like we have this new anvil system. We want people to be not on their like optimal builds of like buy all your perfect items, have the best thing, but this idea of like make do with what you've got. The augment system in a lot of arena has this idea of adapting to the situation that you're in. So we wanted to be able to lean into that. I think Trundle obviously didn't quite hit the mark. He's not coming back right now. Don't worry, he's not in. But it is this idea that we wanted to experiment and play with it. And how the guest of honor voting system works is that if nobody likes this guest, then no one's going to vote for him. And it just stacks the odds in kind of the player's favor. So if everyone hates Trundle, Swain, Darius, Briar, those ones that like tend to come up in this scenario, then people won't vote for it. We won't see it as often. And I'll note that like in our data on this, we kind of used Riven as the benchmark. Riven's guest of honor was no rules change. So if a guest ever had less than Riven, we would see that as a problem of like clearly this is what people didn't want. um and none of them were ever hitting this point. Some of them hit like on par, but none of them, as whenever I was looking at it, never like dropped below that. So it's definitely not a for everyone scenario, but it is a nice like change of pace or place that we want to experiment with, especially in these places where players can opt into it as a collective or not. There's also some amount of aspect. We don't want to go too far here, but this idea of like you can be the villain of the lobby. And put yourself into that position. I saw plenty of times with streamers or in my games this idea of like someone votes for a thing because they want to be the villain, and it kind of they put themselves in that scenario, and that's something that's good to allow to an extent.
That's actually really interesting. It actually reminds me a lot for people who played TFT back in the day of the Stillwater Hold, where that was just there are no augments. And I think pretty much everyone recognized the game is just less fun with no augments, but people would still rarely vote for Stillwater Hold because they wanted to be the villain, or because they thought it was funny, or because they wanted to like grief their friends. And like, I get it, that can be really frustrating, but it can also be a pretty novel experience that can add some value and some depth, right? That's one of the tough things with game design is sometimes some of the things that actually can add depth to your game will sometimes also be frustrating and can be bad experiences, and moderating them is effective, or like can be effective if you do it correctly. I will say it's surprising to me to hear that Trundle was more popular than Ribbon as someone who voted Trundle every single game, because my perspective on that was, especially like when I was playing, I was going for Arena God. And so my perspective was like, well, of course I should vote for Trundle. it introduces more variance to the game. If I just roll the items I want anyway, then I just got them cheaper. And then therefore, everyone else is likely on average to be weaker. So I'm basically just saying I'm more likely to be first if I put this in. And if I go eighth because of it, I don't care. I'll just queue up for another game. I definitely understand why other people would not feel that way. But that is interesting to hear that it was more popular because in my experience, most of the time I was voting for Trundle, I was kind of on my own. But it is interesting to hear that that Riven was less popular as the no change at all. Um, it's very interesting. I don't really have much else to say about it. It's just that yeah, that's very surprising to me to hear as someone who
Yeah,
was
that
never
was
looking at the data.
that was part of the reason that we made Riven as she was a great way for us to get the benchmark on it. And then obviously on the lore and narrative side is Riven's kind of in this like screw Noxus
Sure,
idea.
yeah.
So it's like, here we go. And then as a dev, like pretty easy guess to make.
Wow, yeah, you really got to put in the weekend overtime in order to get that Riven one in. Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I think that probably covers Trundle and counter purpose. Let's move on. How does the dev team view unpopular guests? This is, we were obviously just talking about this, but do you have any other specific thoughts, like exactly targeted at this question of like unpopular guests? If you don't, not speaking specifically to Trundle, but I like Dick Darius, I guess, is another example of one I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah, yeah. So I think Darius, for example, is another unpopular one. We think there is something healthy about these like shorter games where you have to pay attention to that. Like this is a shorter game. I'm not going to go for the longer scaling aspects or augments. I'm going to try and build things that work a little bit earlier, favor early game champions, that kind of aspect, or just a shorter game version of the mode. That's why Evelyn Guest of Honor has a very similar thing to Darius, where it's all teams go to half health. But then in her case, I think we've done a better job of rewarding you for doing that. And that is all augment rounds give double augments.
Oh, interesting.
Um, yeah. So the idea is like it's a shorter game, but you're going to have much more power in the augment space. You're still kind of reduced on items by the end of the game, but you have this extra aspect on the augment side. I think where we went wrong with Darius and Briar was this idea of it's shorter game, but we're not like rewarding on the fun end of it. So her playing in this space is what we're hoping to get with there.
That's kind of cool. I hadn't really thought about that space, but yeah, accelerating some aspect of the game to compensate you for shorter game. I could definitely imagine people really liking that, or at least there being some people that really want a shorter game with more augments, just like turbo up on that side. Do you have the reverse of like shorter game with more items, or are you that just we're just we're gonna see how Evelyn goes or what?
I think right now it's to see how Evelyn goes.
Okay,
I think some of the things that worry me on the item space is giving more gold, for example, is largely just turns into more stat anvils.
yeah,
And there's definitely a point where like the game just becomes this like stat checky. It's either one shot or unkillable or whatever. Like the decision points don't matter as much that we're worried about. This is one of the issues that we run to with shard holder that
yeah.
we're trying to pay attention to. Um, we've done some work on that. I should probably talk about that a little bit later, but that's something that we. I think there's something interesting there, but I really want to see how Evelyn works first, and then maybe we can find kind of the right aspect.
Okay, yeah, that sounds cool. All right, let's move on quickly here to the next one. What level of planning in builds in Arena is correct? Newer versions of Arena have more augments, and it's harder to target specific augments or combos on a given champion, compared to the original where the pool was a lot smaller and you would, expect to see a given augment. I don't know what the percentage, what chance was, but it's definitely lower now, right? Like that's just true. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, so I think lower if you're playing on live right now 16.8 or earlier, then yeah, it's lower because we've added more augments. It's a lower chance in that sense. In the 16.9 release, season 2, the release we're talking about, there's some more tools for you to be able to target what you're looking for. First off, we have more augment rounds, so you've got that aspect of it. But we've also got, because of the augment leveling system, you can choose to take a new augment or level an existing one. So if you're targeting a specific augment or neither of the options that look good to you, neither of the options look good for you, you can choose to level an augment instead, and that means that you can defer that choice of taking a new one for later. So you've actually got a fair bit of control on that end. And then round 8, we've actually got this crafting round that lets you gain another augment slot, or remove one of your augments, so that you can kind of open up those spaces. Um, their planning is not necessarily how I want to think about Arena. Like, hey, you're going in, you're planning. I'm going to be like, I'm going to play Jeweled Gauntlet this game. We really like this idea of Arenas about adaptation, exploration, rolling with the punches, that kind of vibe. And so going in planning of I'm going to play X is not what we necessarily want to aim for, but this idea of like, how can I make this work for my character? Um, that we're really leaning into. Obviously, there's some amount that can go in, but that's really where we want to be putting that level of focus, and that's why we've got the idea that you can remove your augments, level other ones, etc., to kind of give yourself that edge.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I definitely will say there are, sometimes you see like an augment combo in, your TikTok clip or whatever. Not that I really watch TikTok, but you see the clips on like Twitter or whatever sometimes of like, oh, that's so crazy. Do you have any thoughts around like, letting like obviously this new system, you can, with the ability to get more control over your augments and be able to remove the, augments and so on and so forth, you can kind of like live the dream in some ways more frequently. Do you have any thoughts about like letting people live the dream in a more specific way, more or less, or like what the like how you feel about that? Because obviously there are some combos of augments and champions and items and stuff that are just kind of like, yeah, you probably just win unless you run into someone else who also has like a similarly like insane combo. But your champion might only have a couple of those. And you don't necessarily have the ability to opt into like which way are you going, right? Like JG is a classic supporter of these, right? Where it's like, yeah, some champions you get JG, and with the right prismatics, right, you get Sword of the Divine, you just start one-shotting people, right? And the damage is just kind of like wildly out of control. Some champions don't have that though, right? They don't even have a damage one. Maybe there's one where they're unkillable. Do you have any feeling on the control over the type of sort of wild runaway pop off people have?
Yeah, I think the big thing really is like certain things you take will add or remove options from your pool. So for example, if you take back to basics, this makes so it seals your ultimate. You can no longer get things that deal with that. So anything that's like your ultimate gains an extra charge, you can manipulate the pool by playing with that. Or you can taking a summoner spell replacement means you can't get any more. So those are removed so you can target down that line. uh, and so I think there's that idea that you can remove certain things, you can get other ones into your pool. In terms of different play styles, I think, so one thing I forgot to mention actually is we are actually removing some augments from the pool with this release. So while we're adding in new augments, we are pulling back on some. Uh, there's a right number of augments, and I feel like we're probably at that space to where we would probably be cycling some of them to so that it isn't this ever expanding pool of augments that you're never able to get Jeweled Gauntlet when you want to, kind of thing.
Okay, cool. You have any other thoughts there? Or are you good to move on?
Um, I think it's the last thing I'd say is it's something that we're definitely paying attention to. Obviously, we don't want Jeweled Gauntlet. I'm going to keep using Jeweled Gauntlet as the example, but like we don't want that one as a like one in a million games kind of deal. Um, and so getting the balance between this is a reasonable thing for me to find versus an or versus like someone got this in a game somewhere and I that will never be me. We obviously don't want to be that far, and we're hoping that we can give other experiences where it's like, yeah, I didn't get Jeweled Gauntlet, but I got other cool things for my champion, this other style of build that is still really sweet there. And the hope is that with the different augments and prismatic items offered, that there is kind of this like path that you can go down, the paladin builds, the high damage, the high durability, the team supporting, all these different aspects that you can go down with on many a single champion can go down many of these different paths.
All right, sweet. Let's take a look at the next one then. old school arena thoughts, where this person was talking specifically about the 2v2 v2 v2, having fewer teams and having a smaller pool of everything, and having even in some cases some sharp item and augment counters. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I actually, um, this is a big part of why I've been such a big proponent of 6 teams of 3. Is a very similar vibe. So first, before I get into an answer there, the last event we're doing for this release here is uh, 2x4. So back to the old school. If there is a particular team that you're wanting to focus on or pay attention to, um, that event's going to be really targeted towards you. But I think with 8 teams, we run into this issue of you don't get to see, or the more teams we have, there's this issue of it's been so long since I played against this opponent. I don't remember what they're doing. Their build has changed so much. Buying grievous wounds when only one team's dealing with healing feels like it's a waste. That kind of thing. That uh, becomes a problem when we go up to larger teams. There's a lot of benefits to it, particularly in variety, and there's you might have a good team, but someone else counters you. That kind of aspect that comes with bigger team or with more teams. But we run into this clarity side and strategy side of issues. So I think going back down, in my personal opinion, down to 6 teams feels like the right number. Because it allows for more teams and not having that, not going too small to where you just have one team that kind of run the lobby. This is one of the issues we saw when we only had 4 teams. Is one team would be on top, and it felt very early on. It felt like that team was unbeatable, and they were just going to win the game. It allowed you to target them, but only so much. So getting the balance there is really important. Um, so yeah, look forward to 3x6. So if you're on that, or 2x4, I think is really the big things.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have any particular thoughts on that. Played a lot of that version of Arena. I'd be interested to try out 2x4 again. So, yeah, let's move on here. All right, non-combat bonus rounds slash mini games. This person was talking about like PVE or even like non-combat PvP, right? Like kind of I think like Mario Party style mini games was the vibe I was getting. You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we've actually tried these kind of things a few times, um, and I think there's definitely something interesting here. The tricky thing is adding this onto a game mode that is already this like 2v2 combat thing that people have signed up for, and then adding something on top of it that feels like it's pulling in a different direction runs into a lot of issues of this is not what I signed up for kind of aspects. Um, I think PVE rounds in particular, like our champions are not well designed for good PvP or PVE combat. You think of like the most interesting PVE encounter that we have in League of Legends is probably Baron, and without the other team, it's kind of just a gimme. uh and so I think there's some version of this like PvP with a little bit of other stuff going on. The Bulwark Blossom on the Ancestral Woods map, pillars, etc., kind of play into this, but getting the right shape for it is tricky, especially when added on to an existing mode. I think it's something we're very interested in. Some of the early guests of honor or events that we had tried was this idea of like, it's not a PvP round, or it's a PvP round, but the winner is whoever kills the most minions, and you have infinite revives. And it kind of just fell apart in terms of like quality of, you're still trying to fight your opponents. You actually aren't paying attention to these minions. A lot of things kind of around that we ran into in some of our early tests.
Yeah, that is interesting. It makes sense to me. Like I would predict that would be the most likely outcome. I will say, like from the SR side, every couple of years someone tries to make the Baron encounter more interesting, and every single time the immediate result from playtest is like, no, actually, we're not supposed to do this. The interest is supposed to come from PvP. And every single time we ask people to pay attention to the PvE and like aspect of things, they're like, why am I doing this? I need to pay attention to this Lux, not to the Baron making me go into the pizza zone or whatever. Like, showing these triangles from FF14, and making sure I don't step in the goop or whatever. And then it's like, oh, this is only interesting when there's no one there. And then also when there's no one there, I don't care about it because I'm just gonna like do all the mechanics. It's like, okay, yeah, every week like I said, someone tries this every couple of years, and every time we come to the same conclusion. But it's such a cool fantasy. I definitely get why people would think this would be really cool, and internally we also think it would be really cool if we found the right way to do it. But it's just I think it's kind of a like to some extent a cursed space because so much of the game is built to be about PvP, right? And that's kind of where a lot of this stuff starts to break down. There might still be good smaller opportunities, right? Like as an example, one of the things that's been proposed before in an SR even is like, what if there was a mini game you could play while you're dead? It's like, yeah, maybe that's just cool, right? Like I don't know, like, there could be something fun there. Um, but the really like big, punchy, impactful versions of this, I strongly expect that in the space they're just kind of cursed and probably not super likely to work out.
Yeah, I think to your point on While You're Dead, this is actually what the Kled Guest of Honor played with. Is this
Oh,
idea
you
of
get
like
the
when your team's
tomatoes, yeah,
eliminated?
yeah.
Yeah, you got to bomb the other teams. I think we played a very safe version of that intentionally. You're screwing with other teams. We wanted to be very careful there, but I think there's something very interesting about that aspect. But in a pure PVE kind of encounter, like you said, interest gets really tricky, and especially when this is a game that's like highly mechanically intensive, and then you have a PvE round that you're kind of just like pass fail on how this is going to work. So as a player, you know you can do this, you're good enough, or your champion's good enough, or whatever kind of thing, and then you just it feels like it's just wasting your time. Let me go into the PvP combat where it's much more exciting. I think TFT can get away with this because it's a chance to feel out your comp, get the builds and things start to come together and feel how everything works. But in something like Arena where you're like directly controlling your champion, it doesn't have that same aspect to it.
All right, sounds good to me. Let's move on. How far away can Arena be from SR? What about arena specific stats, arena specific champion? I have my own thoughts, but I want to hear your take on this first.
Yeah, so I think Arena's pretty far from SR in a lot of ways. We're still a MOBA. That's where we overlap, and some of our like our item systems. Specific stats, I I think it depends on what. Like we use adaptive force on items and other things like that a little bit more, but I think the big thing is that like our characters and our gameplay systems are still built on the same core, to where it doesn't make sense necessarily to have different stats. We have some different keywords, like burn tends to be one that Arena uses that makes sense for Arena and makes sense for Mayhem, but isn't something that necessarily makes sense in like Summoner's Rift. So I think there's some amount of that we want to have, but that's because burn is this like build enabler aspect that it doesn't quite work in SR systems. And then for specific champions, I'm not sure what we would get from that of saying like, hey, we built this champion, they're really cool, and they're only in this mode. Um, there's definitely different designs that work better in one mode or another, and ideally they kind of uh, we have champions that work in across the board, but you know some are going to lean more in one aspect or another. Minions are a really good example. A lot of champions like Irelia and Yasuo play with minions very well, and they just don't get that aspect in Arena. We'd like to solve this, but I wouldn't go so far as say, hey, we should make a champion who is for Arena, and then they just can't play other places, because we have a lot of people who like these champions and they want to play them across the board.
Yeah, that'll make sense to me. My immediate take when I read this initially was like, arena specific stat, like you were talking about, we sort of have a little bit of this, and I could definitely see how we like when we would want to like. I could see a world in which we have like an actual stat that's like, oh, we have a new stat that does actually like multiple things. For example, where like we have a new stat called like flubelflarbing or whatever, that we need to like. We really want to be able to do these specific things in arena, and we want to be able to like keyword that and like refer to it in a way. And it's like, okay, that's a stat now. You can have 7 flubelflarbing on this augment, and this item actually has 4 flubelflarbing and whatever, right? And it's like, what does that mean? Well, just it means whatever arena wants it to mean, and that's kind of exactly what the burn thing is doing, right? In the
Yeah.
sense that there's sort of a vague concept of burn in SR that's sort of like, yeah, Brand does like things that say when you deal spell damage, set the enemy on fire for X seconds or do damage for X seconds. He's really high synergy with those. but we don't have anything that specifically says when you burn, do this specific thing. I'm not saying we couldn't,
Yeah.
but um, that's kind of where I like my thought, like where my head is at on the arena specific stats, like kind of already there. Could definitely see more of that in the future because like there's obviously just things that make more sense for arena that don't make that much sense in SR. Even more so than the burn, because like the burn thing is something where I look and I say like we could do something like this in SR, and I think there'd be no problem with that. Um, the champion I'm pretty dubious of, right? It's kind of to the point of just even beyond the design aspect of it, I think about the production aspect of it. I'm like, if we're making a whole champion, why are we making them only for arena? We might as well put in the time and the effort and say like, this is just a champion for every mode that we have in the game. We were just like, champions just take a lot of time and a lot of effort. A lot of people have to be involved in making a good, like high quality champion. If we're going to spend all that time and effort, I feel like the value proposition for making an arena only champion, which would be easier to make for sure, but not that much easier than making a champion that's like high quality in SR, right? And so I think that's one case where it's like I have a really hard time imagining what the motivation for us to do that would be.
Yeah. On the stats and stuff as well, some stuff that came to mind there is like we also have autocast that plays in this. Of every X seconds, your augment does a thing. We hook into that with some other items, or the new Hui guest of honor, and some of the augments you'll find later on in the fame track put these stickers on future augment selections. So they'll say like, this augment has a green sticker, and if you choose it, you will also gain 400 bonus health in the case of Hui. Or these augments interpret that green sticker and say, I'm going to heal. One of the things this augment can do is heal, and by the more green stickers you have, the more it heals. So we've kind of built this like substat system that still directly hooks into what people are familiar with, but you can take these and get them only in these certain ways.
That's actually pretty cool. I remember you talking about that system to me like months ago. Like this was like last year, and I was like, that sounds really cool. And then I hadn't
Yeah,
seen
so
it, so
that
I actually didn't know I didn't know that it was in.
yeah, it was like, hey, this idea is one that I thought was really cool. We should do. Oh, but we don't have the current stuff to do this, and we're already doing so much else. It just we don't have the time. And then literally on the drive to our holiday party, I was like, wait a minute, I can do that. I know how to do this with our current tech. And so I'm like, okay, last minute, this one's going in. This one's going.
Okay, I like
So
that. That's nice. All
yeah.
right. All right, let's cross this one out and move on. Item inconsistency between SR and Arena. This person was talking about how it's like confusing, what's going on, and I already know some of this, right? But like specific examples, right? All the items in Arena are indexed to 3,000 gold, and so they have like they're scaled up or in some cases scaled down to meet that. But then there's also even differences beyond that, right? Like the most recent, one that comes to my mind was like I think this is true on live. Is I don't actually know if this is true for sure, but like Shiv is energize in arena, but the version that's currently on live before we change it to back to energize is the like 3 hit with a cooldown that resets on takedown, like very confusing thing, which I don't personally love. So I'm glad we're changing it in the upcoming S2 patch, but I'll let you do your thing here.
Yeah. So typically we want these to be one to one. Well, on the back end, they are separate items for us that helps with tuning and that aspect. From the player end, they're the same item. They should be. We want if you got IE, it should look like and behave like IE. If it's numbers tuning differences, we're okay with that. But it should still give the same kind of stats, similar effects. But we have made so if there's inconsistencies there, then that's probably a bug or something that we wanted to fix on our end. But for certain ones, like Axiom Arc, the effect on Summoner's Rift just doesn't make sense for Arena. So we've changed that to be something else that we think will help assassins in Arena's aspects or in Arena's gameplay. Whereas Static Shiv is actually one that like I have it on my list of like, is this worth keeping in the game for Arena? To be clear, actually, the new Static Shiv is so cool. I'm very excited for it, but in Arena's case, it doesn't make sense because there's just there's other champions, there's not other minions, it's not even large team fights. So it's this idea that like, yeah, that one probably we're on the fence about keeping. Um, but as on the whole, they should be pretty one to one. And if we need a different arena item that for whatever reason, we should make a different one so that there isn't this confusion of like, oh, it behaves one way in one mode and a different way in another.
Yeah, that'll make sense to me. Yeah, I think I will say it's like this is one where I absolutely empathize with this can be confusing and hard to tell what's going on, but at the same time you have to look at it from our perspective of like, look, the shiv that's in SR doesn't make sense in arena. And I know the reason, the reasoning for keeping it as the energized version, the previous one was like, oh, well, there's a bunch of energized synergy in arena, and so it's valuable to have an extra energized item. It's like I don't see a great solution here. I guess the best solution would be introduce a whole new item like that has an Editor's effect, but also has like its own clear, distinct theme and gameplay and all of that. And it's like, well, that's not that realistic, right? It's not like we're able to spend infinite dev hours on every single thing. That means making new VFX, new icon, going to like IP strategy, making sure the name is okay. It's all this other external stuff. I just think this is one of those things where the effort is just better spent elsewhere almost all the time. And so it's like, yeah, it's not a great, like it ends up not being amazing in some cases. Like I think there's some edge cases where it's not ideal. I think Shiv is probably the one that comes to my mind at least. But it ends up being, I think, the best uh version of this for Arena itself. Is the way that it's currently done. All right. Let's move off of that one. Duo buffs like Zaya and Rakan. Thoughts?
Is this like how Zaya and Rakan have their innate synergy, or is this like we should? I guess I'm going to assume it's that. I'm not totally sure what it would be otherwise.
I think this question originally was intended to be about that kind of thing, but I think it's also fair to talk about some stuff like the Darius Draven, like the augment stuff that has been in and that kind of thing. So
Sure.
we could just talk about both.
Yeah. So the Zion Recon one, I think that's really cool. I think doing more stuff like this would be really sweet. It's really a like, is it worth the squeeze for something else? I know you talk about this a lot on the stream, but basically that like it'd be sweet. I'd love to have more of these kind of things. This is very similar to like champion specific augments, but it's is it worth more than something else? If we did more duo buffs like this, then let's say that we'd have to make, I don't know, 15 fewer augments for the release. And there's and that's a hard thing to sell. Like if I'm having to choose between them, 15 augments, that applies to the entire roster of champions, new builds open up, etc. For something like this, where it's like, oh, we did this cool little synergy for Saya and Rakan, and it's cool for that comp. If you're playing that comp, and this is putting aside art, VFX, animation in particular that might have to come out of this, but that's really where those things are. And this is very similar with the champion specific augments. I love these. I think everyone really loves these. It's just that making one augment for one character versus one augment that can apply to like minimum 30 characters is where those things have to where we have to weigh what's valuable enough for the game.
Yeah, I kind of think of this as like recent comparison, as I've been playing a lot of Slay the Spire 2, is like, okay, imagine you make a champion specific augment. This is applicable to 1 out of 170 champions, right? And it's like, oh, when you make a character specific relic or card in Slay the Spire 2 or 1, it's like, oh, this is applicable to 1 out of 5. There's a really big difference there, right? Like that's this isn't just like the numbers are slightly different. It's like there are orders of magnitude different where the value proposition is so far off. That having been said, they're so cool that they can still sometimes be worth it, or like investing in the time and effort. It's hard to find the right time and place because same things. Like I've talked about this a lot with like runes, for example, right? Like champion specific runes comes up a lot as a topic in SR. And it's like, yes, we all think they would be super cool, but we also have to face reality of
Yeah.
time is limited, right? Dev hours are limited, and we can't just all spend hundreds of hours on the weekend, putting in augments and then saying, oh, by the way, also now the artists need to do that to make all this work, and then also the engineers need to make all this tech work, and and so on and so forth, right? And so there are limits to what we can do, but I don't think anyone is disagreeing that these would be awesome.
Yeah, and this is why since when we said, hey, arena's going to be on for this extended run, every champion release that's happened over that, we've done a specific augment for them. Unara gets a really cool one, and we're talking with the champion designers when we do each of these of like what's some cool ideas that you guys left weren't able to do, or something that you think would be a way to amp up. Yellow, working on Unara, him and I sat down and talked about this for a bit with that of like, what's the cool quest or something that we can do. We've done that with Shyvana. Silas was just one that we did at the start of the Demacia season that I absolutely loved. This idea that you can steal your allies ultimate and play with that.
That
So
is
we
so
try to
cool.
get these when we can, but it is, yeah, I really like it. It's a fun one for him. And this is the kind of thing that like Silas players will love, but for obvious reasons runs into other issues in other modes where it's like if you can pick your champion regularly in like a competitive environment, you're like, okay, we just got like double a Mumu ultimate or whatever, that could be too much there. But
Malphite,
having it as
yeah.
a variance in the augment system is like, this is like, he's not going to get this every game. It rolls into that make do with the current situation. So we've been trying to do a handful of these as when we can, but there's currently no plans for, we will get to all 170 some odd champions at some point.
All right, let's go to the next one. What is the end goal of Arena?
Fun. Is it like we don't have I'm curious what that means by end goal of like is there more to that?
I'm going to be honest,
Um,
unfortunately, I don't remember, and I deleted the entire section of my Discord, so I can't even look at what the question was anymore. I just put them in here. Um, I will say this is very open ended, and reading it now, I'm like, why didn't I add additional context? I'm sure they had something else. But let's just do our interpretation of what is the end goal of Arena. Like, what does that mean to you?
yeah, I think this is very philosophical all of a sudden. This is Arena in my mind is a smaller, lower stakes, high intensity version of League of Legends, where you are like I keep saying adaptation, experimentation, and those are the like pillars that we use when guiding direction for the mode. Where you're rolling with the punches, you're making do with what you've got. If things are not working out, you can get out of there, but you're playing with a small group of friends versus something that's a larger scale. We intentionally don't have this idea of rank. This is something that we had tried earlier on, but we've seen that players actually really like the almost middle intensity that arena gives, where like it's still a sweatier version of the game, but not at that same level. So when we talk about like the goal of arena, I think it's really like offering that alternate way to play League of Legends with these characters that you really love. You have the randomness and chaos side that comes with mayhem. You have the climb and the competitiveness that comes with Summoner's Rift, and arena plays in a little bit more of the in between space that allows for you to choose your champion, still deal with the chaos, still have some of that intensity, but not at that same level. And even intensity is not quite right, because it is still like playing with this like sometimes you're just going to lose because someone else high rolled, and we often compare it to like TFT in League of Legends, which is, TFT's already in League of Legends, but you get what I mean. um, and so it's that aspect of the game. I don't know if you have other interpretations here. I can go into some of that too.
No, I think that's good enough for me. And I do also apologize to the person that asked this question that I failed to write sufficient context. Hopefully, this gets at what you were looking for because I don't remember what the additional context was. So, apologies. That's my fault. Roguefool was innocent. He had nothing to do with my crimes that I've committed. So, let's move on. And again, my apologies. Any chance for an arena mode with longer games?
there's always a chance for these things. It's a kind of what do players want. There's definitely some people who want a longer game experience, but we've seen that the majority of the players want a shorter one there, and this is why we're like the health ramping up or the damage ramping up as you're going forward helps add this extra intensity to the later rounds, but also helps keep the game at like the target length that we're seeing people enjoy. Um, so there's a bit of what do we want out of longer games? Evelyn makes shorter games, but makes them with double augment, so you have that extra spike on it. So it's more uh, augment chaos through a shorter game. And if we wanted a longer game itself, I think that it's what do we get out of that? Right now, that'd really be on live, it'd be like just more stat anvils that change up your build. You've seen how everything works with the new system. There's a little bit more length that could be added in. Not that we've done that, to be clear, but like with the augment removal selection, all that we've added in of like crafting your perfect build. But there's still a point where it's like the game gets very death touchy or intense in those last couple rounds that we don't like adding more to doesn't necessarily add to the experience. But if enough people wanted this and went this direction, like this is what we saw players pushing for, then we could definitely be looking in that direction.
Yeah, my thought on this, I think follow up question here is, do you feel like the like on live right now? Because obviously, I'm sure it's different in the upcoming version. Do you feel like people drop out of the game at the right rate? Because one of the big things I remember with the original arena was, hey, one of the core values of it was that if you die early, you just get to queue up again, right? Like, kind of
Mhm.
borrowing from other games and other genres, right? Like you think of like TFT or uh, BRs, right? Like PUBG or whatever, where it's like, oh, when you're low rolling, you get to just play more games, and when you're high rolling, you get to experience that game more. Do you think that balance is right, or on live? And do you think that that's like something that you're looking to change going forward?
Yeah, I personally think that. So for some context here, when Arena first came out, I believe the earliest you could get eliminated was round 7. I might be slightly off, but I'm pretty sure it's round 7. And that's if you lost every round. And
Mhm.
that made a lot of sense when we only had 4 teams, because going down to 3 leads to there's this weird someone has a bye, and then it's just back and forth between these 2 teams. Doesn't have the variety that the mode kind of promises.
Mhm.
When we go up to 8 teams, we moved that down on the initial release down to round 4 was the earliest that you could get knocked out, and players felt like they didn't have enough of a chance to put a build together. They didn't essentially have enough augment selections in that time frame to feel like they got a chance to experience like what arena is. And so we bumped that back up to round 5, and that's where it is right now, is the earliest you can get knocked out. I think in terms of my personal take is I still think round 4 is probably right if we could solve that like feels like you got the arena experience there. um but other than that, I think it's largely in a pretty good space.
Okay, cool. Love to hear that. All right, let's move on along. Can there be an arena event where everyone fights each other on the same map? This one, I love putting this one in the doc. I would love to get your take on this.
uh we would need a bigger map. Is a big part of it. I think stuff like this is very cool. A thing to play in. This kind of talks about the like PV. It's not PVE, but that like different kind of event shaking up the game that I think we're very interested in. Um, right now, we don't have a map that would work for that. I think throwing everyone into the like the vote arena, for example, is probably the largest space we have, but obviously that's big open, no walls, no brush, anything like that. um, so I think there's that side of it. There's also just the like combat quality and what people want out of it. It's a fun little idea of an experiment of like, hey, everyone quickly fights. But I think trying this probably even after the third time, it leads to some really weird outcomes where like if it's last man standing, you want to just go wait, let other people fight, then you actually come in and kind of like scoop up and third party everyone. That could kind of come out of it. So I think it would necessitate having some more. But it's a really cool idea. I think there's legs to it. We just would need to get it right. And have the space. I'm not sure if I'm convinced everyone in the same thing. Um, see, teams of two has 16 players. Teams of three has 18 players, so that's quite a lot going on.
Yeah.
But directionally, I think there's something really cool there.
Yeah, I mean, 18 players, that's just a normal League of Legends experience, right? Just a
Yeah. That's
lot
just
of people.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Well, I'm glad. I love thinking about this. This is a good one. Thank you for whoever put this one in there, which I will never know because, like I said, I deleted the Discord section. I don't even know who asked these questions. Apologies again. I probably shouldn't have done that. But let's move on. Do you have any interesting stories around the development of certain items, maps, or augments? This is broad. Hit me with your best ones.
Okay. The Noxus Arena, Reckoner's Arena, was the first map that I worked on. Um, and initially, the plan for the pillars was this idea that they would slowly take damage over fights. They weren't going to be knocked down so early. They probably wouldn't start falling down till like round 5, but the damage dealt to them would stay. So it was this idea of like, oh, we damage it throughout the fight. It takes incidental damage, and then they'd fall over, and people just felt like they'd go up, they'd walk into it, they'd hit it, and they'd be like, oh, that didn't matter. Like, why I'm not going to try and hit this in the future. And so when, people had been telling me, no, we need to have them falling down every fight, do this side of things. I'm like, no, I have this grand vision for how it's going to work. And yeah, and they were 100% right. When we switched to this, it was immediate. Oh my god, this is so much better. Um, so this was one I'm like, I'm very happy with how the pillars and the map side of it has shaken out. Um, but that I think that's the side that we ran into. Um, Trying to think of some of the others of like Pyromancer's Cloak was a I was just learning how to use our dev tools, and so like you've had, I'm sure you've had those epiphany moments where you're like, wait a minute, I know how to do this and I can do, and so this was a like weekend hackathon, I can figure it out, and side of things. Trying to think of like augments playing in something similar. We've had a few that we've played with that I have this idea of like cloning your champion, that is really cool. Um, I think for curse augments, when they first came out, they had infinite scaling. I was never a fan of curse augments. I was in this boat of like, this does it doesn't make sense. It's not and clearly they've worked out very well. But I was in the camp that like couldn't see the vision. And so when they went live, we were going on holiday break like right after. So we knew we wouldn't have time to do any balance work. So the designer who worked on this, him and I are sitting down and we're like, we're not going to have a chance to do any last minute stuff. This is the state they're going to be in. Are we okay with this? And so it was a really intense like last couple days before break. Um, Trying to figure out what we want to do. I honestly don't even remember if we like turned them off or capped them or whatever at that point.
I know they got disabled. I don't remember if that was before or after the break. Like which
Okay,
one
that was
I don't.
probably it then. Is I think we disabled them then, and they've come back and they're a fan favorite. Excuse me. So they've definitely worked out really well. I just couldn't see the vision on that. I think there's a number of times where like I think this is one of the things that I think Riot does really well is we just kind of trust our designers enough to be like, yeah, I don't see it, but like clearly there's something that you do, so let's give it a try. And in Augment's case, this is very easy for us to like try something, and if it doesn't work out, we change, disable, do whatever. And it's less load bearing than something like an item or like God forbid a champion would be.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that the personal design agency is really nice. I often like I've told the story of Malignance before, where it was like there were a lot of doubters, but Malignance did work out really well, and that was like I believed in it. Soul Crush believed in it. Gap believed in it. It's like, oh, okay, we have enough support for this. Let's send it, and that was awesome. And yeah, I'm sure there's lots of similar stories in the augments and the prismatics and all that sort of stuff as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of that stuff is nice. Do you have any? Uh, do you have any particular stories about any of the other prismatics? I mean, you talk about Pyromancer's cloak. I personally like so to give people context on my interaction here is like I remember when the prismatic item system was being made. I got like I just had like this mysterious meeting that was added to my calendar that was like talk about items or something, and I had no idea what was going on. I go into this meeting, they're like, "Hey, we're making this whole new item system. We want to get your your thoughts or advice on it." And I was like, okay, first of all, let me read through your documentation, of which there's a lot, and your goals and all of this, and like try to understand all of this in this like 1 hour meeting so that I can like give you some feedback on this. As like the guy who made a ton of items at that point, I've made even more now. But and so my perspective was like, okay, they're trying to make this whole new layer of variance for the game. And then like from my perspective, it's kind of like I sent off all my feedback, and then the next thing I saw was like the whole system. And so I didn't actually like really get any like personal understanding of like how did we come to these shapes of prismatics exactly. So that like if you have any interesting stories about that, I would love to hear that, at least from a personal perspective, and I imagine other people probably would too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this was in the space of like I was learning how to use our tools, so a lot of the ones that I made specifically were like figure it out, like as I'm stumbling through things. Um, so I think I may not have the best on all of the best stories on all of them. I think uh, Lightning Rod was one where we had this augment called oh, what was it called? The lightning rod autocast effect. I can't remember what it was called. Where basically you would have your autocast augments would scale with your ability haste. It's a
Right, right.
really cool augment, but it takes an augment slot, and so you can't have as many autocasts, and those two fought against each other. And so what we ended up doing when we were making these prismatic item systems is we started seeing them in the vein of I got a cat here who's visiting. Um, yeah, who's um they're kind of the relics from Slay the Spire aspect I was talking about. And so we said, well, if we're going to have this prismatic that like rains down a lightning bolt on you, we should have it play in the system. We can have it be that missing piece that enables this extra aspect. And we started to see the prismatics kind of playing in that like enabler capstoney kind of space between them. So that was one that came out, and we're like, there was some initial skepticism. We tried, absolutely loved. um, Regicide and Rune Carver are ones that I think early on we were like a little skeptical. I was skeptical on. I was like, I don't see it here. I don't get it. And they've worked out. They've been quite popular for their different sides of things. Um, let's see. I'm looking at the list right now. If there's any cool ones to quickly talk about. Puppeteer, the idea was, hey, we want something that lets an enchanter carry. Twin Enzo, this is something that he really cares about for Arena. And not that the rest of us don't, but whenever we're like, hey, we need something for enchanters here, he's like, all right, how do we do something that works in this space? For the double enchanter comps, enchanters notably like struggle in 2v2, and so we've had to do a fair bit of work to kind of help them succeed. And then when you have double enchanter, it's kind of like, well, what's their path to victory? And Puppeteer was this idea that you can get your opponents to fight against each other. So it's something that we've played with a bit. Um, I could ramble on these for a bit, but like,
Hit me with your next best one. Like, we'll do one more.
okay, okay. Uh, Dragonheart was, I think, a standout success of allowing for uh, other builds, or this kind of like alt path to success of on its own. It's fine. It's not particularly great prismatic, but if you can do this like infinity gauntlet collect the dragon souls thing, then you just kind of get to Elder Dragon and snap and beat everyone. And there's still gameplay there, obviously, but it is this like mini quest that you get to go down that I think people have really enjoyed, and that all opened up this like almost alt win condition to the game that has been really enjoyable.
Yeah, I'm a big Dragonheart fan. And not just because most of my arena hours were striving for arena god, and if you get Dragonheart going, you pretty much first the lobby a large percentage of the time. I really like the narrative of like, oh, I built up all the dragon souls, and then I get Elder Dragon. Like, it's actually interesting that it's borrowing so heavily from the narrative of SR of like, oh, you get your soul and then Elder comes afterwards, and this is like you get all the souls and then you get Elder afterwards. Is actually I've always really liked that story. Even if it is, I will say, like, pretty frustrating when someone else gets it and you're just like, okay, well, I guess I'm gonna get murdered by Elder Dragon now and it's gonna be over.
Yeah, and then hopefully we can get you out of the lobby quick when that happens, and then get in, you have your next one. Or because it's still Elder Dragon, they still need to get you low for the execute, that you can burst them down or
Sure,
anything in
sure,
that
yeah,
space.
yeah. All right. You have any other stories, or you good to move on?
I think that's good there. If I think of something, I'll bring it back up.
Yeah, we
But
can
I
always
think that
come
makes
back.
sense.
Yeah, I was thinking we'd probably just like wrap up with just some ramble about whatever at the end. So yeah, we can move on.
Sure.
All right, let's cut to the next question here. Did any specific champions require a lot of extra focus when first making/balancing arena?
So I was not there on the initial release. I actually joined the team right. I think the patch that Arena went live, or the original Arena went live. So I don't have a lot of context around that. But I think enchanters and marksmen were really the big ones of like it's a 2v2 mode. It naturally lends itself to fighters, who can succeed in that scenario, especially as the Ring of Fire is closing and it kind of forces everyone together. So there was a lot of work put into how do we make sure that these other classes who are typically best in a like larger team fight kind of scenario work well in this scenario where it's much smaller. This is one of the reasons that I actually really am a big advocate around threes, is because I think it strikes a good middle ground between the smaller scale and the larger scale stuff. Um, but in enchanters, we've had to definitely tune and handle some work around that, particularly like Sona, who's really built into this larger aspect, or marksmen being able to sustain and handle on their own. Mages have had some work as well, because if they can't like traditional mages, if they can't blow you up in their initial combo, what are they supposed to do? Power flowers help out here. Um, we've also run into a bit with uh, I touched on this a little bit when we were talking about puppeteer, of like, how does a double tank team win? Are they just stalling you out? Well, that's not particularly great for anyone, so we don't want to go to that regularly. But this is why a lot of the tank things can be some version of convert your durability into some form of damage to allow for these alternate paths, or like that being kind of a primary path when you are the only when it is a highly durable team. I don't know about specific champions.
I, I believe this could be wrong. I might be a little off. I believe when we initially made Arena, the strongest champion by an enormous amount was Tarek, and the weakest was Bard. And I have stories for both of them. Like the Tarek one made a lot of sense, right? I remember when we put the first version of Arena out, I was talking with some of the people who were working on it, right? Like this was like at the time like Madness Hero, for example. And it's like, oh well, of course Tarek is amazing. He's terrible at getting income in SR, but if you do get money on him, he is insane if he's allowed to melee people. And then we put him in a mode where the map is really enclosed, and of course you're going to be able to get to melee people, and you get gold for free. Of course, Tarek is the best champion in the game. He's just going to beat you to death while permanently healing himself like to full. And he can solve his mana problems, like all of the problems that he has, kind of like he's either very easily solvable or just don't exist in Arena. And so that made sense, right? Like, and so we just like put Tarek in the dirt, right? And he's still good in Arena, is my recollection. Like I think he's actually still pretty strong despite having a lot of nerfs. And then the really weak one, and this comes with the great story, is Bard. I remember when Arena first came out, uh, there were so many things that needed to be worked on that some of that stuff ended up getting kind of like farmed out to other designers, right? Where they actually asked Phlox to do balance passes on a few champions. They asked him to buff Bard, and he took Bard and took him from the worst champion in Arena to the best champion in Arena by a lot, to the point where he got hot fixed because the buff was so over magnitude. He was just flying around. Like if for anyone who played Arena, I think it was on like the second patch. Bard was just flying around like one-shotting people with his meeps. Completely insane. was only live, I think, for like a couple of hours or something like that, maybe a day or something, because it was just like, yeah, Flox's buff was just so completely insane that he just like it didn't even matter what you built. Your base meep damage was so insane because he cranked up the number of stacks you got on your passive per round to a just completely insane value. And so, of course, that had to get undone. So that's my recollection of the early days of Arena as an outsider. But that's something where if you really wanted to hear this, maybe I could try to get like Madness Hero or someone who might remember better to come talk about that, because my recollections of that time are pretty hazy, given I was not working on Arena back then. Well, I never have worked on Arena, but uh, I,
I bounced enough ideas off you that you basically do. But I actually one more recently is Zillion, who went from one of, if not the weakest champion, and whose passive was non-functional in the mode, because of just how
the XP
rounds and
breakpoints,
experience
yeah.
worked. Yeah, how that worked. To when we said, okay, let's let him. I think it's every 3 rounds is what we initially tried. You can give yourself and your partner a buff. He went from, or not a buff, a
A
level.
level. Oh, that's cool.
He went from like the worst or one of the worst champions to top tier player. And ultimately, this comes out to I think it's like 3 extra levels a game or something. I
Wow.
don't remember exactly what it came to, but like, 1 level every 3 rounds, and it can't go above 18 is, you would think, is too insane, but that's just such a massive jump from that kind of change that we've had to nerf it multiple times. And I think it's now every like 4 or 5 rounds that he gets this extra level, simply because this isn't where we want. If we need to nerf him, this isn't where we want to be nerfing him. We want his passive to be functional, but I'd rather nerf. Or sorry, this isn't where we want him to be strongest in this extra level aspect. We'd much rather that be in like his Q and his ultimate and those kind of things than in just this I give levels out to people. But it really speaks to just how powerful a level advantage can be.
Yeah. Yeah, levels are strong. All
Yeah.
right. Well, I like that one. All right, let's get moving on to the next question here. How important is balancing augments? What's the design philosophy behind balancing the assorted options?
Yeah, so we're less concerned about the like typical win rate kind of balance and like that for the modes, and much more of like the uh variance and experience across the board of like, we know that you're not going to be able to get raid boss every game, and it's okay for it to be a high roll when you can get it, or insert whatever augment is kind of best for your champion. So it's much looser than like traditional League of Legends design in the sense of where balance is, but we want to make sure that things feel exciting for the characters and champions that they should be. Um, and so some of that can definitely lead to what we would typically think of as like an imbalanced state of like, this champion with this X number of things is unbeatable. We're okay with that because of the variance in the system that it allows. And in fact, for that reason, we actually do not pay attention to games where you're getting like, I think it was 3 prismatics or more. We're just not even looking at, because that's such an nth number of games to kind of experience that it doesn't filter into kind of how we think about those things. So we allow people, like, it's a little different in that aspect, because we really want to have a range of higher highs, lower lows, and in those lower low situations, move on to the next game, and uh, that you're going to run into.
That all makes sense to me. Yeah, definitely. It is interesting talking about it because I know this is something that a lot of people were agonizing over in the early days of Arena, and I think the conclusion ended up kind of being, okay, we don't have to agonize that much over or like around this. Is like I think the early days, especially, I remember when I was talking with Madness Hero, one of the original designers who worked on Arena, was like, oh man, we really, we got to be really careful with this augment, or like, oh, this augment is too synergistic with this champ. It's like, well, actually, the mode in some ways is kind of self-balancing. It's like there are limits, right? But it's just, well, if
Yeah,
you
yeah,
don't
yeah.
get it that often, then how strong is it allowed to be when you do get this combo, or this this champion augment combo, or this combination of 2 augments or whatever? Is like, well, it gets to be pretty powerful, right? And if other champions don't have sufficiently powerful things to combat that, then you can just make more of them, right? Which I think actually ends up working out pretty well.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that has, as more augments have come into the game, that things like Mystic Punch, for example, that is a really high roll for certain characters. Uh, it's still that high roll for them. It's still very fun, very iconic, but they're not going to see it every game. Whereas like Mystic Punch on the initial release, when there was much fewer augments, you would see that more frequently. And now that's a little bit less of the case. And like famously on this, or I guess famously like internally, I should say, is the original. The we reworked Mystic Punch. Uh, Several months ago, because and this we wanted it to be less dramatic. The thinking was that like, hey, let's pull it down in some of these cases because it feels too powerful in those synergy in for certain champions. And and like now our thinking's kind of been reversed on that of like, yeah, it's okay for it to be really strong on them. It's really cool for those characters. It's something that players want to see, and we shouldn't water that experience down. Um, because one out of every X number of games, they're going to be really strong.
All right, let's move on. What's the story behind events like threes and bravery?
So threes is something I've talked about a little bit about this throughout, but like threes is something that's kind of been a white whale for me. Of like, I think that this is the right space for the mode. We'll see if that proves true. But I think it reduces the number of teams down to a manageable amount. It opens up space for more characters and more team comps to kind of live in their more natural space. Like our champions have been designed for fives, Summoner's Rift, and so and ARAM as a part of that. And so allowing for more of the like larger teams, I think is probably a more natural and better space for them typically. We'll see if that holds true. But the events idea was really like, let's try these multiple shakeups to the mode, so we don't have a stale meta, but b like see what's the most fun aspect, whether that's whether that's still twos, whether that's threes. And we know bravery is something that a lot of people enjoy, so and have been asking for a bravery only queue. We don't want to split the queues for a number of reasons, but if we can say, hey, this is the bravery event, then where then it gives people who are looking for that something that they're looking for, and those that really want to show that like, I am the ultimate arena player. Then if adaptation and experimentation is what is the pillars of this mode, then you should be able to show that in each of these different versions. So it's this cool idea that we're looking to experiment with, of like, if the game itself is regularly and just kind of like naturally evolving, then we have this like self-churning meta, and this different ways that people will play it and find what's the most enjoyable aspect there.
Yeah, and to be clear to anyone watching, when this guy says 3x6s is white whale, he's not exaggerating. He's been telling me about this for years. Legitimately, I like every like probably like every month or two, I really want to do three like 6 teams of three. It's gonna be so cool. Like, okay,
Yeah,
man.
so it I
I
made
get
it happen. I made it
it.
happen. It was legitimately a Thunderdome. I don't think we've said this actually, but this was a Thunderdome project
Oh, I didn't
that
know that.
myself and an engineer, Larice, worked on, where like we've been building out some aspect for it for a bit, but like Thunderdome, we sat down, we said, okay, we're going to do this. Um, got everything hooked up to be able to support it, and at that point then it's just kind of like, hey team, it works, we're gonna do this.
Oh yeah, for context, Thunderdome is like Riot's annual hackathon. Basically, like everyone takes a couple days off and like you can work on whatever. It doesn't even have to be on the game that you work on, or even if you don't work on a game directly, you can work on anything. Basically, like you can assemble a team. If you can convince people that something would be cool, you can go build it. And this is where some of the like the original ARAM map, for example, came from a Thunderdome project many years ago, right? Like the Howling Abyss map. And some other smaller stuff as well, right? Like there's been lots of things that have come about from Thunderdome, but yeah, that's what Roguefool's talking about here.
Yeah, I think Brawl was the other one most recently.
Well, that one's kind of fake, but sure.
Sure, but
Brawl was already playable before the Thunderdome. It was for sure refined heavily and kind of like executed well upon. during Thunderdome, but I wouldn't really call it a true Thunderdome project in the same way that something like the actual original ARAM map was, or even the 3x6, the 3x6 like what you're talking about is just because it was already like a functional prototype before Thunderdome was started.
Sure, fair, fair.
Okay, yeah, let's. You think that's sufficient for this one?
Yeah. We'll see how it all goes. See what people are liking. But yeah, I think that works.
All right, well, let's move on then. Why doesn't every augment have 3 levels?
The big thing here is really like we didn't think that every augment needed this. Um, I think early on the thought was that we would have 3 levels of every augment. We'd have this transformative capstone kind of effect on all of them. But as we were developing it, it was like the system's actually more interesting if some augments are baseline as cool as they can be, and then there's some amount of like strategic trade-off that comes with that, of like you're taking something that's stronger early on but it can't level up, or just for baseline for it to be cool, we didn't want to have that level of scaling that needs to go into something that has all those levels. I could definitely see in some of them we add more in the future, assuming levels is really cool and we're loving this. But I think that it's it's a give and take of what makes what the system needs, and what at the content level what each individual augment needs.
Yeah, makes sense to me. All right, let's move on quickly then. Why was Shardholder nerf? General thoughts around it. Hit me.
Yeah. So Shardholder, for those that don't know, what started as an Easter egg was this idea that was created by Captain Gameplay, one of our designers who helped us out on one of our releases, and it was this idea that you would. If you're going for a challenge run, just getting just stat anvils, there's this really cool payoff that you can discover and build around, and it took off. Early on, I was very skeptical. I was like, this isn't a thing that people are going to do, whatever. I was just completely wrong. This is something that people love to go for, um, and it's become a fun challenge run for a lot of people. And a defining play style on top of that, for them. We ended up having to nerf this because it felt like it was dominating the game too much, and because the gameplay around it is basically just outstat your opponent, it can't be a regular thing, and it has this weird. Um, it's almost like parasitic kind of effect where if you and I are playing a game and we're the only ones in the lobby who are going for this, we're probably like it is the challenge run that we intended. But if half the lobby, or X% of the lobby is going for this, then we are more likely to succeed, and it kind of forces everyone else to have to play this same strategy, because part of the risk that you're taking on with Shardholder is you're much weaker early. But if, say, the entire lobby is weaker early, then it doesn't matter that one individual is. Someone is going to come out on top and hit this incredible power spike. Um, so early on we had actually or so we ended up needing to nerf this at the and we've built in and expanded on shard holder, with this idea of an item. It's also just very unclear to people what's happening because you have to kind of be in the know. So we've given you this item that represents everything. It tells the other teams, if they're not familiar with shard holder, what this is, and it prevents you from purchasing items going forward. So you're committed to this idea of buying a bunch of stat shards, buying a bunch of anvils, um, and this is the play style. This is the risk that you're taking on, and now it's also just better communicated to everyone else. So we're keeping an eye on it. If this is something that needs, if this becomes a problem, we have some better levers now for playing with it that still keeps it clear. But we don't want to fully remove this because it's something that a lot of people love. But we also don't want the game to just turn into it's all about stat shards. There's a fine line to walk there because this is something that a lot of people love.
Yeah, when you're talking about the like parasitic thing, the terminology that comes to my mind is kind of like a reverse prisoner's dilemma, where it's like, oh, the more people that opt into this, if you aren't opting into this, you start putting yourself at a larger and larger disadvantage because the more people in the lobby that are doing this strategy, the more free like buys they're going to get in their rounds, and then therefore the
Hmm.
person that like spikes hardest is going to pop off most. And the shard order, the end payoff is really powerful on like on live right now. Like when it works incredibly well, and it is it out like high ends most of the other strategies in the game. There are some things that can beat it for sure, like certain augment combos, certain champions, etc. But in the average case, a like fully statted out like shard holder duo is going to like first the lobby a lot of the time if they can get there. And so when you end up in these situations where multiple people in your like multiple teams in your lobby are going for it, it's kind of like, oh, you are playing normally, you fool. You can't actually beat the shard holder, like the shard holder pop up. You can't actually first this lobby because one of the shard holder duos is going to make it. They are going to pop off, and your only way of defeating that was to do this. And so it's like, yeah, I think parasitic's a good term. Reverse prisoner's dilemma is another one. It's
Yeah, that's
a
probably a better one, honestly. Yeah.
it's sort of like a other people are doing this, therefore you must too. The prisoner's dilemma part is good because like it gets at the social aspect of it, where if no one was doing it, or if only one team per lobby was doing it, none of this is relevant, right? That which is kind of weird. It's a very interesting paradigm. I'm sure that there's like you could do psychological studies on this. I'm sure it's a very interesting topic. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely fun to go for those challenge runs, but not something you want to see every time, especially again when like I keep saying it, but adaptation, experimentation's the theme of Arena, and that completely gets cut out when it's okay. I go in, I'm buying stat anvils, I have to keep doing this. You just go down that through line, versus something where it's like I'm going in, I'm trying to play with this augment system, trying to play with this team comp, etc. And oh look, my first augment is something that plays really well with stat anvils, and this means that I can go down this path is much more interesting for that.
Yeah, that's totally fair. All right, let's move on. All right, so we're actually at the end of the questions that I pulled from my Discord, and again, apologies to those people that I deleted and wasn't able to retrieve extra context that I didn't write in here for whatever reason. But my plan here was we just sort of hang out, talk about Arena in general, and just get some extra thoughts of just some topics that either one of us wanted to talk about. So I was going to start out with what are your thoughts about the Arena God title? For those of you not familiar, this was you have to first a lobby on 60 different champions in order to get the title. I had a ton of fun going for this. I would love to get your thoughts as an arena designer, like about that specific thing and potentially other things like it.
So I think there's some really cool stuff to this. I think there's good and bad, like most things. I think calling it Arena God makes it really hard for us to say like what's the next thing. Like how
Super
do you
God.
build up from that?
Giga
um,
God.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so and it's like okay, we and it initially when we initially added this, I think it was the full
It
roster at the
was
time,
everyone,
100.
which was insane. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And now when we moved it down to 60, like we have people who are going for the full roster and it'd be great to have something for them. So I do kind of wish that like Arena God had stayed at the full roster. There's some weirdness there of like as the roster grows kind of
Yeah,
things,
yeah.
but like say we picked a number that was the full roster at the time. Um and uh then had like smaller steps along the way. Like there is things like Arena Champion that's along that path,
Mhm.
but it also has this other issue of uh, part of like a win in Arena is not just first place. A win in Arena is the top half of the lobby. First place is extra on top of that. And if when we said the only like meta goal to the game is first place, it undercuts that. And I think especially as someone who you said like really loved going for it,
Yeah.
second place stings.
Yo, yeah.
Second place that's supposed to be really cool just felt awful. And so we run into that kind of issue. So I think like if we were doing it over again, what I think we would want to do is make Arena God like higher up, so it's a even harder goal in that sense. Have some smaller steps along the way, but also have other meta progression things that we'd be going towards, so that we don't just have that and as the only thing that you could be going for. um, because of that aspect to it. I think like one of the things we're doing with this arena release, for example, is I don't remember the exact details. I worked on it, so I should remember, but there's a lot. Is basically like I think it's get 5 or 10 wins in every event, meaning the 2x8, the 3x6,
Oh,
bravery, and 2x4 is, and then that gets you a title for completing all of those. And this again ties into if you're like wanting to show that you are the top arena player, show that you can handle each of these kind of events along the way. Um, that helps tie into some of these other things that we could be doing.
okay, that's cool. I'll be doing that. Is this
That's sweet.
first or is that top half?
I think it's wins, so top half.
Okay. All right. Well, either way, I would. It actually, I don't even know why I asked the question. I would do it either way. So, um, yeah, that
Yeah, like we
was.
still want people to be going for first. It's very fun. That's like when the top end, the most crazy builds come together. But in a like free for all kind of setup, like Arena's got, like top half of the lobby is a win, bottom half is a loss kind of aspect. We could definitely get more granular, and I think we probably like a better version probably like amplifies that, not just in the arena god space but in game, first place being this extra level, whereas right now getting like fourth place, it happens right as you're out. It still feels like a loss. There's ways that we could probably make that better, but uh, that like the world we're in right now is that's where it's at.
Yeah, I definitely get that. I definitely, when I was doing the Arena God run, I remember thinking like, oh, seventh or eighth, awesome. Let's queue up again and just go. And then when you get caught and you're like, oh, this was like a fourth, a third, or a second, like I spent so much time on this game and I, didn't make any progress towards Arena God. That felt really brutal. Especially on some of the champions. I remember there were champions I was like trying to play. I ended up starting eventually just like randoming it towards the end, but then I got frustrated by randoming champions that I already won on, and that was even worse.
Sure.
But that those points aside, I definitely remember some of the champions I was trying to was like, oh man, I just got like I think there were a couple of champions I got like four or more like second places in a row, and it's just this is absolutely brutal. I think I went on a streak with Elise at one point where I got I don't know, it was something like I want to say like 7 or 8 maybe. I don't remember the exact details, but it was a lot of seconds in a row, and it was just absolutely like soul crushing at the time. I was like, I've played so many games, they were all long, and I didn't make any progress, which was rough,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
sure. And that definitely I would love to see. I could definitely see some improvements there. It's definitely a rough experience. Um,
It's a cool title to have, though.
it is. It
I
is.
don't know the data on this, but I would assume it's one of our rarest, and uh, like props to everyone who's got it. Like it is, not even everyone on the team, myself included. I don't have Arena God, and feels wrong to say that.
You got to get in
And
there, man.
I'm gonna be trying for it. You can help me out.
Okay, yeah, we
Um,
can play some.
yeah, but I think it's a really cool title. I'm really glad we did do it. I and people obviously love it.
Okay.
So when I'm saying that there's better versions that we could do, I'm not regretting what we've got right now.
Yeah, yeah,
Is
no,
what I want to be clear.
yeah, I think it's good. I mean, there's definitely some really cool stuff about it. Yeah, for sure. Like, well, it has its downsides, but it has its upsides for sure. Right, the way that it is right now. Um, moving to a different topic. For the threes, right? We have some stuff that's kind of built for like twos, right? Like, we have like augments and items, right? Like, I think Twin Mask is out, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Twin Mask is no is being removed from the game for a number of reasons. One of them is threes. One of them is this. It's the quest aspect is really cool. Of like, I got this item, you should try to go for it. But the payout, because it has to be so generic of just here's more stats, isn't the most exciting. And like the stats that I get as a mage are not actually the stats you care about as a marksman. So even though we completed the quest aspect, it's not what we want. Um, so it's gone for a few different reasons there. And then other augments, castle. What is the Callista ultimate
Fate's
one?
Call, I think,
Oathsworn.
Or Oathsworn, sure. Well, Fate's Call is
Yeah,
what
yeah,
Callista Ult is called, I guess. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So a lot of those have been adjusted to in twos. You're not going to notice any change, but in threes, they tend to do some version of like target the ally closest to your mouse. So in Castle, I absolutely love this, especially when you get like Summoner Revolution that gives you extra charges on your spells.
Mhm.
You can castle to an opponent or to an ally, and then castle to a different
Oh, that's so
one.
cool.
Yeah, and do this like mind game switch people around aspect, and if you get the extra charges you're bouncing all over. Castle's capstone as well, if you move through an enemy while that's happening, I believe it refreshes the shield and stuns them or something. So it's got this like try to hit people as you're going. um with the Oath Sworn, it'll pick up whichever ally is closest to your mouse, and again, if you have multiple charges you can pick them both up. uh yeah, lots of cool things there. The Empyrean Promise Prismatic, same deal. Uh, so it's been really cool to see some of those come together. I think Clothesline is actually the biggest one.
Does it just go to
Um,
both allies?
yeah. So you get
Oh,
a
that's cool.
triangle.
Oh, you get a
Um,
it does both the allies to each other as well.
yes. So you get a full triangle, and if you like, I've seen on live PBE, uh, insane play around this augment that went from like, yeah, it's kind of goofy, kind of fun, sometimes we'll do some stuff with it, to like legitimately strong when you're like playing around, because you can also get hit by multiple beams at once.
Oh, okay.
um so lining that up can do a lot of crazy things. uh so yeah, it's been cool with threes.
Okay, so that I was the question I was actually going to ask. That was just I think it was just
I,
like me mentioning Twin Mask was gone because I thought that was true. I wasn't even 100% sure about that. But uh, did you have anything special that you want to cook up? I assume you haven't actually done this because threes is limited time right now. But like, do you have anything special you cooked up? Like, oh, here's the threes equivalent of Twin Mask, or like the special thing for threes that is, oh, it's cool because you have three people. Obviously you just talked about some of the augments that are cooler, but in arena, right, there was a bunch of stuff built for you have two people, therefore this thing kind of makes sense. Did you have anything in that way that you built for threes or that you want to build for threes in the future?
Oh, definitely. I think right now most of it is like, hey, make the things built for twos also work for threes.
Sure, sure.
And we've like to your point of like, I've been talking about this forever, of like the pillars map was designed to be larger in part to help support some of this.
Mhm.
So it's been in the background a bit. But in terms of like, oh, here's a really cool threes aspect. There's some stuff that I would absolutely love to do. There's this I haven't gotten to test it. There's definitely risks to this kind of idea, but like an augment that involves replacing everyone's summoner spell on your team
Whew.
with this idea of like call ghostly spirit thing to you, and so everyone on the team is like calling it back and forth between them in this like highly strategic. The person who's got the ghost is amplified, but everyone's kind of fighting for an aspect. I think there's some cool stuff we can do with like in team voting or augments. When you have two people on a team, if we pop up a selection that says like, does your team want A or B, it's if there's a disagreement, it's just a coin toss. But in threes, you kind of have this like, okay, well, there's always a majority rule kind of thing. um, so I think there's a lot of cool things that we can play with there. um, there's we haven't gotten to do as much as we want, or as much there, because right now, or like threes is an event. We didn't want to put too much into there and take away from everything else on top of what we had already done. But if this is the version of the game that people absolutely love, then we would definitely dive further into this.
That's interesting. Yeah, the quest thing is particularly interesting. It reminds me when I was working on feats of strength when like Captain Gameplay actually came to help me out with feats for I don't know, like a couple of weeks. And one of the things he wanted to really try, and we actually did test, was your team would vote on quests for your team to do at the beginning of the game. And there was something really cool about that. And in SR, just like with the threes, it's like, well, you have an odd number of people, so you actually cannot get stuck, right? You will always have someone to break the tie as long as you force everyone to vote. Um,
Mhm.
and the way we did that was by saying you can't leave the fountain unless you vote, which that worked pretty well. Turns out people like leaving the fountain, but yeah, it is interesting. I wonder if we'll ever hit that, like having that in any game mode, because there's something really cool about the idea of like your team making a decision, between like some options, and then having someone like the odd person be the tiebreaker is very cool. I definitely like I said, there was definitely something very cool about that when we tested it for feats of strength. Didn't end up working out, right? We ended up downscaling feats quite a bit and shipping the version that people know, but there was definitely something cool about the team vote version. So I could definitely see something like that working really well for threes arena.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of cool things that can be that we can play with there. So if we dive into it in the future, for sure, I would expect us to play with it a little bit.
Yeah, that could be cool. Um, what do you think will be the most, or, like, what do you think the best part of having threes is? Like, is it that the combat is more variant? Do you think it's the way that the math works out for like the right number of teams and like the right number amount of variance of the matchups? Like, what's your like top number one like value reason that you think that the three teams is the way? Or sorry, teams of three.
Um, yeah. So I think those are all a big important aspect to it. I think one that gets overlooked a lot, that I've definitely seen from people internally, and I've talked with, and I feel this with my friends, or when I'm playing with higher skilled players. Like, End Step is much better at the game than I am, and if we're playing arena together, for example, in twos, there's this pressure on me to perform, that just gets put on of like I'm letting him down, or this risk around that, even if I'm playing with a friend of a similar skill level and I'm just having an off game, there's this feeling that comes with it. There's also just fewer people that see you doing your cool thing. Like Arena doesn't have a pentakill equivalent
Mhm.
because there's
Yeah.
only two people on the other team. When we get at threes, alleviates some of that social pressure of like, hey, I'm the worst player this game, but I can amplify him by I'm gonna run a support to help out with the team aspect, or there's less pressure on me socially to be talking if I'm like not feeling it as much. There's less pressure of like to perform as well because we are much more of a team rather than like we are two individuals. Fighting games can run into this trouble when it's like 1v1. They're often seen as like a highly competitive thing because it's 1v1. You don't typically have a team aspect. 2XKO has teams, but like that's a side thing. But yeah, having a larger team allows some amount of like obfuscating yourself, while still allowing those pop-off moments of look how cool I'm doing, and everyone gets to see that. There's few things that compare to getting a pentakill in Summoner's Rift or in Mayhem, because everyone is seeing this cool thing that you're doing, and it's just that much more impressive because it's against more people. And so having more, essentially, it's both more eyes on you when you're doing well and fewer eyes on you when you're not. That I think is really good. That is easy to overlook. And when I've talked to people before, they're like, "I really want to get into arena. I really like arena, but I just feel like I'm letting my teammate down," or something along those lines. Often comes up in the discussion, and I think threes allows for just a lot more on that front.
That makes sense. Yeah, I kind of like that idea a lot. I haven't really spent too much time thinking about that, but that makes a lot of sense to me, the social pressure stuff. All right, new topic. Are you ready?
Okay,
So, you made
teams of
Seed
four.
Jar in Wild Rift. When are we going to see Seed Jar in Arena? Where
Okay,
is the Seed Jar coming in?
so I made Jar and Wild Rift. For those unfamiliar, this was an item we were trying to get strategic things for supports, and the idea was when you take a plant, it drops a seed. You can pick it up, you can replant it. This really cool aspect. I believe it's now turned into a keystone effect for
Yeah,
them.
that's what
And
it was
thinking
last
back
I
on,
played.
okay, yeah, thinking back, it should have always been a keystone. I don't know why I missed that. That is just like brilliant idea on their part. I think it's a really cool effect, but on an item it struggles for a lot of the like reasons if you want this in the early game, have to build an
Timing,
item,
yeah.
etc. Yeah. So I think, um I I still think there's legs to this kind of idea. In Arena's case, the only real plants are the power flowers, and because of how the timing of the game works out, you're like, hey, I got this power flower and then I replanted it. Now I'm just going to pick it right back up because we can't have a long stretch of time before it regrows, or you're just getting it again and planting the seeds. So why don't we just say instead, hey, your plants are twice as effective? We actually have an augment, Fruits of Your Labor, that I designed, very seed jar inspired, is when you hit a plant, an ally gains the effects as well, and the effects are stronger on you. That's trying to play in this plant kind of space. But I think replanting in Arena's case runs into that struggle. Um, and otherwise, it's like blast cones are an awkward thing to try to replace. Technically, the bulwark blossoms a plant, and so like you could say that, but it has some. Yeah, there's a lot of weirdness there. Do we let you plant pillars and then you can knock them over on someone? That'd be cool. Um,
Pillar
but
plant.
so I still think there's something directionally to this. So who knows? Maybe I don't know. You go make it as a keystone, as an item, or figure out, make it live on in the rest of the game.
Yeah, actually, that fruits of your labor thing actually reminded me when I was working on the Kled changes last year. Um, I remember fruits of your labor. I had like I think it might have been the patch I shipped them. I don't remember, but for whatever reason, that there was some overlap of people thought that I caused this arena bug where if Kled was your teammate, took fruits of your labor, and hit a plant, it would give their ally courage and then give them Kled passive, which was obviously
Oh
like
yeah.
messed them up horribly. And I remember I was getting pinged like that. Like I came in one day and I actually got like over the course of the day, I think I got pinged like 15 times by different people telling me that I'd caused this bug, and it wasn't true. For one, for two, it was increasingly funnier every time because it's like, well, every time someone shows me a new clip of this ridiculous like Kled's teammate has Kled passive script, or I think it's Kled Health Manager or whatever the appropriate script was very funny. That's what I thought of when you were talking about the fruit sharing augment, because the fruits were they're supposed to give you courage, right? If you were dismounted Kled, and so the courage would try to add the courage to Kled's ally, because that's how it was set up. So that is what that reminded me of, which was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun that day just trolling people about the Kled stuff. But yeah, eventually someone fixed it. That wasn't me, which was nice of them. I don't even know who fixed it. It might have been you.
Yeah, I legitimately can't remember if I caused the bug when, because you and I were talking about the Kled rework, and it was like, okay, he's also struggling in Arena. Kind of bringing this update to him. What aspects do we like? Should I be looking at for Arena? And I can't remember if when I said, hey, Power Flower should just work and help give you courage. This is something that he struggles with. I don't remember if I did this or you did or whatever, but I did go and fix it. It's probably me who caused it when I was doing that. But yeah, it's really fun seeing everyone throw a bear trap on a rope out.
Yeah, that's sweet.
Yeah,
You can remount on anyone. You can dismount on anyone. You can be anything.
I
You
don't think it
can.
was that far.
Was it? I don't remember. I just remember it looked. I remember it looked ridiculous. I don't even remember
It
the
gave them
details.
his cue, so he was so it
Oh,
was like
I
Ash
see.
with bear trap and stuff like that.
I see. Interesting. Yeah, it was so long ago. I don't even remember all of the details. I just remember getting pinged about it all day long, which was super funny, and just seeing all the ridiculous clips of it. It actually kind of reminds me. This is a totally irrelevant tangent. It has nothing to do with Arena. It reminds me of the bug from Feats, where if you were Rengar and you killed someone when you had the upgraded Ionians in your inventory, or sorry, if you killed specifically Kha'Zix when you had a fully stacked Bone Tooth necklace and completed the quest, it would turn your upgraded Ionians into upgraded Stork shoes, because I unknowingly had changed the item, like the item IDs of the boots were overwriting some of the old item IDs that Rengar used to use for Bone Tooth
Mm,
necklace, and whoever redid Rengar's quest didn't take those item IDs out. They were just like failing to fire on live because the items didn't exist. And then I made the item IDs the same. Anyway, this I don't know why I'm telling the story. It's completely irrelevant, but it's a funny.
sure.
It's I think the funniest bug I've ever personally caused, which is, oh, I killed Kha'Zix, and now my haste boots are magic pen boots. So yeah, that was a very ridiculous thing that I caused happen.
You're so far ahead if you're killing the Kazakhs that
You
it's a
don't,
nerf.
yeah, you don't need
It's
that
self balancing.
anymore.
Yeah.
It's really to support AP Rengar is actually what we're going for
Yeah.
here. We need to support AP Rengar. When you kill Kha'Zix, you deserve a reward. Uh, anyway, um, did you have other topics? I didn't have anything super specific else planned out here, but you have anything else you want to talk about?
Yeah, I think the guests of honor in particular, I think we took a lot of learnings from the initial set of guests. I think there was 23, and now we're at somewhere similar. Um, More guests coming out later. I'll say that that we've got planned. Not too many more, but a couple. And I think we've really knocked it out of the park with this. We've seen what people really liked about the previous ones, and adding these in. It's really tricky to get the right the easy ones are actually the round one guests that tend to say like here is the rule set change to the game, of like the Fiddlestick says, "Hey, all your augments have the sticker on them that you can take," or things in that space, or it's changing the rules of the game early. And the combat affecting ones are actually the tricky ones to make. Um, and I wouldn't have expected that early on because it's like, oh yeah, we're League of Legends, we deal with combat modifying type stuff all the time, but to have this in a like neutral space that doesn't necessarily benefit one team more than the other and is something that people feel like is justified in something they can use in the game is the trickier space to play in. And I think compared to like the original cameos, what we've kind of learned is that those felt like they were kind of like imposing their will on the game, and the ones that we found to be the most effective of like map modifiers are essentially a tool for players to use. Pillars do this well. We'll see how the Nocturne and Terret guests of honor, who put down either a cloud of smoke that you can hide in or a zone that makes you invulnerable. But it's a thing that the player can say, "Oh, I'm going to use that so that I can win this combat," rather than like this combat a thing is happening. Have kind of been the most successful there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I remember. I recall in the early, like the initial set of like the pikes and the sets and stuff, and like Lux. And it's like, okay, so Lux is basically irrelevant unless you get stunned into it, and then just otherwise you just kind of ignore it. And then it felt like, oh, but set though is like, oh, whoever can manipulate the set to their advantage is just always going to win
Exactly.
that combat. It felt pretty rough. I definitely was not a big enjoyer of that set generally. Well, set, that like not with two T's, which is only one T, just the set of those. But the second one, the guests of honor, the Noxian, guests of honor, I actually really ended up liking. Like I said, I slam the Trundle one every time and try to go for first and all of that, right? And just say, well, if I just roll the augments I want, then it's awesome, or the items that I want. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
um, yeah, I'm interested to see the new ones. I'm looking forward to it for sure. Yeah. Uh, okay. Other
Oh,
topics?
I think. Um, I don't know. I'm excited to see. Like we've been working on this for a long time. Of the last arena, like when arena came out, we had not planned for it to be an extended run. It was super successful. People really loved it. We actually I don't know how many people know this, but we actually like turned it off and saw players all over the world flocking to the China PBE where it had been left on. Um, Kind of by mistake, kind of by those players really loved it, so it was left on there, and so we saw people all over the world queuing into that and having queue times on their PBE, and so we're like, look, this is great. We're going to turn it back on for this extended run so that everyone can get to play it while we work on the next one. We had already said like I think initially we were unsure what the future arena plans of things were going to be. Then that when like I had already started thinking about the next release and what we wanted to do, augment levels being a big thing, and then so we turned it back on. It's been going for almost a year now, and then we've been focused on this big release, so handling both the live updates side by side with that has been interesting. But it is super cool to just be seeing the excitement that everyone's had, and we've put so much into this one because we've just seen how much people love it, and I'm hoping that it lives up to everyone's expectations. I'm hoping it lives up to what people want out of it. I'm feeling very proud of what the team has put together. I think the team's very excited. um, I'm sure Step and others are going to be telling me of all sorts of things that they run into, and I'm very excited to see all of that. But I'm kind of just grandstanding on this of like I'm just happy with how it's all come together. I'm Yeah, I want to see how what people like about it, what people don't, what we can learn from it, because I think it's a lot of cool stuff that we've done.
No, it's good to be happy.
So
It's good to be proud of your work. Yeah. So I think this will be it for us. Yeah. Thank you for coming out and doing this. This was a lot of fun for me, and
yeah.
I'm sure that people will enjoy this long chat. You have any closing statements?
We're coming off PBE in, I think, a week, whatever. 16.9 patch. Play it. Let
Pretty
us know
sure
what you
that's next
think.
week.
Go earn the new title. And yeah, hopefully it's everything you want.
All right.
And thanks for having me on. This was I love these. I've watched all your videos, so it's good to be on.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks everybody for watching. Thank you, Roguefool, for coming out and doing this. We've spent quite a bit of time here on a Saturday recording this video. And yeah, thanks everybody for watching, and maybe catch you in another video. Maybe we'll have Roguefool back sometime. Who
We'll
knows?
see.
All right. See ya.
See ya.